What if I told you that ordering a complex three-course meal in a language you barely speak is actually, like, easier than having a casual 5-minute chat in your native tongue about the weather?
I mean, on the surface, it sounds completely absurd.
Right. It really does. But everyday survival interactions, like getting food, are secretly built on these invisible, highly constrained scripts. And those scripts do most of the heavy lifting for us.
It's a fascinating paradox, really.
Hmm.
We just assume that because we're in an unfamiliar environment, the communication task is going to be monumental.
Yeah, totally.
But the environment itself actually provides a structural safety net.
And that is exactly what we are going to unpack for you today on this deep dive. Welcome, everyone.
Glad to be here for this one.
So today we are looking at a transcript from a pretty popular English learning show called Amazing English.
Right, with the instructors, David and Alice.
Exactly. They are walking absolute beginners through the basics of restaurant English. But our mission today goes way beyond just, memorizing vocabulary words for chicken and water.
Because if you read between the lines, the source material actually reveals this profound blueprint for human communication.
It really does. It shows us how we navigate situations when we are at our most vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly.
So whether you're traveling abroad soon or learning a new language, or you're just someone who, like me, loves understanding the hidden mechanics of everyday conversation, understanding this framework completely removes the panic of the unknown.
It really takes the fear out of it.
It does. So we're going to explore the psychology of making mistakes, the invisible power of polite phrasing, and how leaning into these social scripts can literally save you.
But before we get to the solutions, I think we have to talk about the problem.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's look at that overwhelming sensory experience when you first sit down at a foreign restaurant.
Right. The text tackles this right away. Alice, one of the instructors, describes that immediate moment of opening a menu in another country.
Oh, yeah. Her summary is just brilliant.
It is. She says it's simply too many words, too many foods, too much panic.
Too much panic. It's such a visceral description. You look down at that menu and it's like trying to read the Matrix code without the training.
Yes, exactly like that.
Your brain is trying to process every single sound and letter at once, rather than just seeing the patterns. You go from being a highly competent, articulate adult to feeling entirely helpless.
It's terrifying.
It is. The waiter is walking over, they're smiling, and suddenly acquiring basic calories feels like an insurmountable task.
Well, what you're describing is a textbook case of cognitive overload.
Cognitive overload.
Yeah. Your brain is expending so much energy just trying to interpret the immediate sensory data that your higher level language processing just shuts down completely.
Wow. That makes so much sense.
But David and Alice offer a brilliant countermeasure to this overload. They don't start by teaching food vocabulary.
Right. They start by breaking down the predictable sequence of the waiter's questions. They point out that before you even have to think about the food, the waiter is going to hit you with a greeting.
Like table for one or table for two.
Exactly. And then the very next step is inevitably, what would you like to drink? It's a really rigid sequence.
It really is.
The way I visualize this is like a highly choreographed dance. Even if you don't know the specific steps, meaning the actual vocabulary words in that target language, you already know the rhythm of the music.
Right, the flow of it.
Yeah, you walk in, you get a table, you order a drink, you order food, and you pay.
And that rhythm is universal. If we look at the cognitive science behind this, a restaurant functions as what we call a closed system.
A closed system.
Yes, and this is a crucial concept for language learners. Out on the street, if a stranger approaches you, the conversation could literally be about anything.
Right, they might be asking for directions or, I don't know, commenting on politics or looking for a lost dog.
Exactly. The possibilities are infinite, which means the cognitive load on your brain is massive. You have to be prepared to translate any word in the dictionary.
But inside a restaurant, the context strictly limits the dialogue. The script has boundaries.
It does.
And there's actually this funny moment in the transcript where Alice jokes about asking the waiter for a table for her and her cat.
Oh, yeah, I love that part.
It gets a laugh. But the underlying point is that the system protects you from absurdity. You know the waiter isn't there to give you a pop quiz or ask about your pets.
Right. They just want to know how many people are in your party.
Exactly.
By anticipating those first moves, knowing that table for two and what would you like to drink are coming, you drastically reduce those infinite possibilities down to a few predictable outcomes.
So your brain isn't trying to translate every sound in the universe anymore.
Exactly. It's just listening for the cue for drink. That immediately eases the cognitive load and stops the panic.
So relying on the predictable structure gets you seated and gets a glass of water in front of you. But that passive survival strategy only works for like the first few minutes.
True.
Eventually, you have to initiate the next phase of the script to actually get your food, which brings up a really crucial distinction the source makes about how we ask for things.
Right, moving into the actual interaction.
Yeah, it's not just about conveying information, it's about the social weight of the words we choose.
This shifts the focus from the structure of the event to the interpersonal dynamic between the learner and the native speaker.
David and Alice spend a significant portion of the lesson emphasizing a specific rule. They tell their learners to actively avoid the phrase, "I want."
Yes, that was a major point.
Instead, they repeatedly drill the phrase, "I would like." So you don't say, "I want the chicken," you say, "I would like the chicken."
Right.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
If I put myself in the shoes of someone who is exhausted, culturally overwhelmed, and operating in sheer survival mode, "I want water" seems incredibly efficient. It gets the point across instantly.
It does.
So why do we need to complicate the cognitive load with extra linguistic politeness? Is "I want" really that bad?
That is a very fair pushback, actually. From a purely functional standpoint, I want water successfully transfers the necessary data.
Right. It gets the calories to the table.
Exactly. But what's fascinating here is we have to look deeper at the underlying psychology of the interaction. A restaurant is not merely a transaction of currency for nutrients.
Okay.
It is a fundamental social contract.
Oh, I see. So when you use a phrase like "I want," you're essentially stripping away the social contract and leaving only the mechanical transaction.
Precisely.
It's like treating the waiter as a vending machine. You input the verbal command and you expect the product to be outputted.
That is the perfect analogy. And nobody wants to be treated like an appliance.
Right, definitely not.
By shifting to "I would like," you achieve something deeply important for human connection. You soften a stark demand into a request.
It changes the whole tone.
It does. "I would like" acknowledges the waiter's humanity and their agency in the situation. You are expressing a personal preference and inviting them to fulfill it rather than, commanding their compliance.
It signals respect. Even if your pronunciation is terrible and you're clearly struggling, that softening carries tremendous social weight. It tells the other person that you recognize you are both human beings participating in this shared cultural ritual.
It builds goodwill.
Mm-hmm.
And in a scenario where you are heavily reliant on the patience of the native speaker, goodwill is your most valuable currency.
That makes a lot of sense. But building goodwill and using polite phrasing still doesn't solve the most glaring problem.
Which is?
What if you are staring at the menu and you simply cannot decode the text?
Oh, right. The panic returns.
The source tackles this exact scenario when Alice asks David, "What if I do not understand the menu? Sometimes restaurant English is difficult, especially fast English."
It's the ultimate fear for a learner. You've navigated the initial greeting, you've employed polite phrasing, you are safe inside the closed system.
But the specific data points, the food items themselves, remain completely opaque.
Right, you're stuck.
But David and Alice introduce some phrases that I honestly view as conversational cheat codes.
Cheat codes, I like that.
The first is pretty standard. Can you explain this, please? But the second one is a masterclass in navigating the unknown. They teach the phrase, "What do you recommend?"
Ah, yes.
Which, by the way, prompts a hilarious moment in the transcript where David declares his eternal, undying love for pizza, calling it his best friend who always understands him.
His enthusiasm for pizza really highlights how much native speakers enjoy talking about their local preferences.
It totally does. But looking at that phrase, "What do you recommend?" It really functions like a video game cheat code to skip a brutally hard level.
How so?
You don't need to sit there and laboriously decode the complex manual, which is the menu. You just outsource the entire decision-making process to the local expert standing right in front of you.
The psychology of that choice is profound. It's an act of total vulnerability.
It is. It's almost like a strategic surrender. You're dropping the facade of competence and basically saying, "I'm lost in your world, take the wheel."
And ironically, that puts you in a much safer, more guided position.
Yeah.
Strategic surrender is an excellent way to frame it. And the reason this works so effectively ties into a well-documented psychological phenomenon known as the Ben Franklin effect.
Oh, wait, what is that?
So when you ask someone for a favor, in this case, asking for their guidance and expertise, it actually causes them to like you more.
Wait, really? Asking for a favor makes them like you.
Yes, actually. By showing vulnerability and shifting the burden of communication to the native speaker, you trigger a natural human desire to assist.
Oh, wow. So instead of stubbornly struggling through a menu alone and accidentally ordering something you hate, you've invited the waiter into a genuine interaction.
Exactly. People generally love sharing their expertise and feeling helpful.
That is so true.
It reframes a lack of understanding from a personal failure into an opportunity for interpersonal connection.
But that strategic surrender only works if you're actually willing to open your mouth and risk sounding foolish.
Which brings up the biggest psychological block for any adult language learner.
Right. The absolute inevitability of making mistakes.
Because no matter how deeply you understand the sequence, or how well you use those cheat codes,
Yeah.
errors are going to happen.
Yeah, they just are.
The brain simply cannot process novel linguistic data perfectly under pressure.
And the text handles this reality with an incredible sense of joy. Alice shares this great anecdote about a time she was trying to use her English in a restaurant and she wanted to order a salad.
Mm.
But in the heat of the moment, instead of salad, she accidentally asked for a soda. Two totally different things.
Right, completely different.
And David just leans right into it and jokingly asks, "Did you drink the salad?"
The way Alice reacts is telling, though.
Yeah.
She just laughs at herself. The core philosophy these instructors are drilling into their students is that English learners do not need perfect English.
Right.
They need practice.
They actively celebrate the funny mistakes, which makes me step back and wonder why we generally do the exact opposite.
What do you mean?
Well, we place this intense, suffocating pressure on ourselves to be absolutely flawless in these situations. Ordering a meal is about as low stakes as an interaction gets, yet we treat it like we're defending a PhD thesis in front of a panel of hostile judges.
We really do. We have to consider the psychology of the adult ego here.
Okay, lay it on me.
As adults, we are accustomed to moving through the world with a high degree of mastery. You know how to do your job, how to navigate your city, how to manage your finances.
Right, you feel capable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We fundamentally hate the feeling of incompetence because it feels like a loss of our hard-earned status.
It feels like taking off your armor. You're suddenly exposed.
Precisely. When you attempt a new language, you are instantly stripped of that mastery. You are forced to sound clumsy, to speak at a fraction of your normal speed, to make fundamental errors that a toddler wouldn't make.
Oof. Yeah, that stings.
It does. The ego violently rebels against that vulnerability. So, to protect ourselves, we create this immense, paralyzing pressure to be perfect, hoping that if we just get the grammar exactly right, we won't look foolish.
But that pursuit of perfection is the very thing that paralyzes us.
Exactly.
If you are terrified of accidentally ordering a soda instead of a salad, you'll just point at the menu in silence, which robs you of the practice you actually need.
That is why Alice and David's approach of using humor is so critical. Humor is the natural antidote to ego.
Oh, I love that. Humor is the antidote to ego.
Yes. What most learners fail to realize is that native speakers operating within that closed system of a restaurant are generally incredibly accommodating.
They usually are, yeah.
They see that you are trying. By demonstrating that mistakes are just funny little hiccups, the instructors diffuse the tension that causes adult learners to withdraw out of shame.
Right. If you can laugh at the soda salad mix-up, you'll be brave enough to order again the next day.
You have to give yourself the grace to be a beginner again.
You really do. And the beautiful thing is, as you push past that fear of mistakes and get those reps in, you eventually reach a turning point in the interaction.
The turning point.
Yeah. The source material finishes up by showing how learners transition from merely surviving the script to actually taking ownership of their experience.
This marks a significant psychological shift. We move from the foundational survival tactics to customization and concluding the interaction.
Right. David and Alice introduce the phrase, "Can I have?"
Simple, but powerful.
And they don't just use it for basic items, they use it to fine-tune the order. Alice practices saying, "Can I have extra cheese?" or "Can I have ketchup?"
Getting specific.
Exactly. They even get into the nuances of ordering steak, explaining the differences between rare, medium, and well done.
Essential vocabulary right there.
Truly. And then as the meal winds down, they discuss asking for dessert. This is where David and Alice actually bond over their shared love of chocolate cake.
Chocolate cake acting as a universal bridge between cultures, of course.
Naturally. You can't go wrong. Finally, they cover the logistics of paying, noting the regional difference between asking for the bill in British English versus the check in American English.
Right.
When I analyze this final section, what really stands out is how a simple phrase like, "Can I have extra cheese?" represents a massive graduation for the learner.
How do you view that graduation?
Well, think about the beginning of the transcript. The learner is entirely reactive. The waiter asks, "Table for two."
Yep.
You nod. "Drink." Or you say water. You are just hanging on, surviving the sequence.
Right, you're just following the prompts.
But the moment you initiate the phrase, "Can I have extra cheese?" you are no longer just surviving the menu.
Oh.
You are asserting your preferences. You are shaping reality to fit your specific desires.
Wow.
It's the moment the learner reclaims their autonomy.
The psychological weight of that shift is profound. You are moving from a state of survival to a state of thriving. You transition from being a passive participant in the waiter's script to becoming an active director of your own scene.
Exact.
And as you mentioned, that leads right into the final layer of language learning, cultural nuance.
Right, the bill versus the check.
Yes. Recognizing those regional variations represents an advanced awareness of the language. However, returning to the concept of the closed system we discussed at the beginning,
Yeah, let's bring it back to that.
it's worth highlighting how that system protects you right up until the very end. Let's say you are sitting in a diner in Ohio. You've finished your chocolate cake, your plates are completely empty, you catch the waiter's eye, make a little scribbling motion in the air, and ask for the bill instead of the culturally accurate check.
The waiter isn't going to be confused.
No, not at all.
The physical context of the empty plates and the end of the meal makes your intention universally clear. The environment backs you up even when the localized vocabulary isn't perfect.
The structure of the script supports the communication. You don't need absolute precision because the context fills in the gaps.
So what does this all mean? I think it perfectly encapsulates the core message of this entire deep dive. We started by looking at that cold sweat, the sheer sensory overload of opening a menu in a foreign language and seeing a terrifying wall of text.
Yes, the panic stage.
But by unpacking David and Alice's lesson, we've discovered that successfully navigating a new language in the real world has very little to do with mastering every single vocabulary word on the page.
The vocabulary is almost secondary to the strategy.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the underlying architecture of the interaction. It's leaning on that predictable universal sequence, knowing the waiter will ask for drinks before food.
Right.
It's understanding the hidden power of polite frameworks, using "I would like" to transform a stark vending machine demand into a respectful human request.
Acknowledging their humanity.
Yes, it's having the courage to utilize strategic surrender, asking for a recommendation when you are genuinely lost. And perhaps most importantly, it's checking your adult ego at the door, giving yourself the grace to make ridiculous mistakes, and laughing when you accidentally order a soda instead of a salad.
As Alice states beautifully near the end of the source text, simple English works. Clear communication works.
It really does.
And this philosophy extends far beyond the walls of a restaurant. If you are listening right now and you are tackling any complex new skill, whether you are learning a new software program at work, picking up a complex new hobby, or trying to understand a different culture, you can apply this exact mindset.
Oh, definitely.
Look for the underlying structural script, rely on simple frameworks to reduce your cognitive load, and relentlessly prioritize practice over perfection.
You just take it step by step. You cannot let the fear of imperfect grammar stop you from asking for the extra cheese in life.
A very fitting takeaway.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to carry into your week. We've spent this time decoding the highly choreographed, deeply predictable dance of ordering food in a restaurant.
Yes, we have.
We've seen how this universal script is so incredibly robust that it can guide you safely through an interaction even when you lack the basic language skills. So it should make you look around and ask, what other daily interactions in your life are secretly just highly choreographed scripts waiting to be decoded?
That's a great question.
Think about your morning coffee run, or the first 5 minutes of a Zoom meeting, or the small talk you make while checking out at the grocery store. What is the hidden architecture there? And once you start seeing the matrix of these scripts, how much easier does it become to navigate the unknown?
It changes everything.
Keep an eye out for those hidden dances out there. Until next time, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.